States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just want to note to board members, if you didn't see, there were 2 agenda changes that are in the version that's on docs right now. All right. We will open with privilege to the floor. I'll begin with the policy reading of 3220, public expression at meetings. All meetings of the Board of Education shall be conducted in public, and the public has the right to attend all such meetings. Public expression at such meetings is encouraged, and a specific portion of the agenda provides members of the public time to address the board. This period of the meeting is listed on the agenda as privilege of the floor. The purpose of allowing public comment is to make statements during the meeting to allow for additional views on agenda topics to be heard and considered. This is not the time or place to register complaints about individuals, students, administration, or teachers, or about any items that have not first been addressed through proper channels with those closest to the issue, such as the teacher, building principal, or superintendent, or another party. Individuals making statements during privilege of the floor are expected to be courteous and respectful, modeling for our students how one can participate and have their voice heard in situations where there is agreement or disagreement with others' views. If members of the public have gone through the proper channels and still wish to discuss a personnel matter with the board, they can submit their comments in writing to the board president, or they can request executive session with the board. At its discretion, the board may invite visitors into its meetings to participate in board's discussion of matters on the agenda. The Board of Education reserves the right to enter into executive session as specified in Policy 1720, executive sessions. As a matter of conduct, the public comment section is an opportunity for residents and residents only to address the Board of Education. This public expression should take place only in the portion of the agenda designated. This is usually at the beginning of each meeting. Persons wishing to address the board shall indicate their desire to speak in advance on the sign-in sheet. In order to give everyone who wishes ample opportunity to speak, speakers should confine their comments to 3 minutes. The board will not address specific questions or comments, but may ask you for your name and address in the event follow-up is necessary. The board will not permit in public session discussion involving any individual personnel or students. Persons wishing to discuss matters involving individual personnel or students should present their comments and or concerns to the superintendent, who will share them with the board at the next executive session. I have indicated Cliff Bradshaw. Good evening. Yes.
Jonathan Edson's Envoy is an adult-rated book full of profanity and displays throughout pedophilia grooming. While we wait up to 30 days for the investigation is complete, I asked the Waynesboro School Board and Superintendent to immediately suspend access to this harmful evil and digital audio book until the investigation is complete. There's a child's book called Blonde Boy by Gary Colson, which happened. What would happen if a 12-year-old 23rd student searching Colson's book accidentally picked the Edson Blonde Boy for your library to search it? Do you think it's okay for 7th graders are exposed to Edison's profanity and pedophilia being booked? As the leaders of the school, will you step up and take immediate action to put restrictions on Edison's Blonde Boy while the investigation is underway? Will you get this harmful book out of our children's reach immediately? Please reply to the following unanswered questions at your earliest convenience. Shouldn't DCS school leaders vet guest speakers before DCS students are invited to listen to them speak? Shouldn't leaders like each of you ensure guest speakers are good role models for DCS students prior to exposing those students to the speaker? Will you vet all future guest speakers to ensure they do not hold radical activist views? An email to DCS students warrants a similar email to parents. Moving forward, will you help ensure that student invites always go to parents in the community and never go directly to students alone? Policy 3230, privilege of the floor section states, and I quote, individuals are requested to limit their statements to about. During the public comment section of the March 8th student board meeting, Francis Ford yelled at a community member and cut off another because they went over 2 minutes. The policy request is
It doesn't hurt.
You can leave a copy. Yep.
You can leave it with.
Yep. You want to
Leave
hand
them with
give 'em
Celeste.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't have anybody else listed as indicating they wish to speak. Is that correct? Thank you. At this portion of the agenda, we will move on to administrative reports. I think.
She is.
She is. Hello, good evening. Microphone over there.
Yes, the microphone's on, but you have to kind of be a little close to it.
All right. Is that a little bit better?
Yes. Thank
Okay,
you.
fantastic. Well, good evening to everyone. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the science that takes place every day at Waynesburg Elementary School. And I've got it here. All right. So the core ideas of our science program really revolve around our standards. Students are focusing on these 5 main skills whenever they are conducting a full science unit. They're constructing an argument, developing a model, conducting their investigations, going through the design process, and conducting a fair test. Currently, we have these new Smithsonian science kits for the classroom, and this year we are very fortunate to work with a science coach, Heidi Offlerly, and she has really helped with the implementation of these science kits. So you can see right now, we have all engineering and design kits from K through 5 and life science kits for the majority of the grades. We have some proposed for the 2022-2023 school year, and many of the teachers are incorporating a lot of their other earth and science practices within literacy areas of their curriculum. So I know I spoke a little bit about science at my last presentation, but the great stuff is really to see this in action. So this is a kindergarten class, Mrs. Minutes' classroom. They are learning to recognize the problem. So kindergartners are studying how temperature varies on different surfaces. This is one of their science kits, and they are enthralled here. So the students study the different challenges that are the different problems that are presented to them, and then they work independently to design a solution to the problem. So this is another set of kindergarten students. Right now, they are solving the problem of how to stay warm or how to stay cool in the sun. Sorry. So they study for about 10 lessons, and they learn about the different designs and the effect of shadows and the effect of energy, the sunlight, and how that provides heat, or the absence of the sunlight makes it cooler. And then they design these structures based on a problem. They build their prototype, they test their stability and their ability of these to stay up, cast shade, and then redesign them as needed. So they're really going through the full redesign process. Now this is Mrs. Johnson's class. They are determining whether they work as intended. So these students are not only working with the partners who they design these shades with, they are studying their classmates' designs. And they really get a chance to collaborate and compare their structures. So they'll see, hey, this might have worked well here, or this might have been a good solution that we could implement for our structure in the future. So they're going to compare their process to their classmates. And this is in Mrs. Tedeschi's classroom. So after they learn all about designing their own shades, they are given a new problem, and they have to take and apply their knowledge to their pre-existing, to their new problem. And you can see they just really enjoy it. They are really into the hands-on aspect of these kits. This is another kit in kindergarten, Force in Motion. The students are studying the effect of a push and a pull and how that acts upon different objects. Now this is going to first grade. The first graders study different sound instruments. So right now they're learning about how a vibration will affect sound. So they are taking their rulers and they're doing different tests to see what kind of sound that the vibration from the rulers might cause. And what's great about these science kits and their implementation is the students are incorporating a lot of writing skills, reading and writing skills within their learning. So all of their investigations involve journaling, and they're reading about the different problems, and it also incorporates a lot of speaking and listening skills. Now, second grade science, they also have two kits. This is their life science kit. And right now they are investigating the different parts of the flower. They are learning about how the pollen is transferred from one to another. They're studying and they're drawing and they're analyzing. Third graders are they're more focused on their life science in the first part of the year, and they're now moving on to engineering. So these are some pictures from our third grade classrooms. Here they are learning about how light and the different effects of the environment will have on living things. Another one of their studies is how they can protect animals when their habitat changes. So they will study all different dangers to an animal or to a different ecosystem, and they will study the effects of a certain danger. So the third graders actually had the little millipedes in their classroom, and they got to study them, and they got to really focus on those little roly-polies there you see in the bottom picture, the upper right-hand corner. So one of the problems they solved was how did they get a salamander to safely cross the road without getting squished? So they had to design these tunnels successfully to get the salamander across the road. And then with the roly-polies, they need to gather and coach, not really coach as much as you can, these little critters through the tunnel as well. And they had the roly-poly creatures in their classroom for quite some time. I got to watch them change, but I know they made sure those guys were secure. And here is Force in Motion. The third grade students are using their magnets to build a trash sorter. So one of their focuses on the environment and effect to an animal's habitat is pollution. So the students came up with this solution on their own, and they are designing these magnets to sort trash and to clear the ecosystem and environments of these animals. Here are some fourth grade models. The fourth graders here in this experiment were studying the effect of speed, and they loved this one because they got to do a real life reenactment of some bumper cars, and then the study of friction, of the cars going down the ramp, and the effect of speed on a moving object. And they're constructing the explanation of how faster objects gather more energy. And here are some fourth grade students preparing for an earthquake that hopefully we're never going to see here. They have gotten pretty far into designing their structures for an earthquake, and to test them, they start off slow with a easy earthquake, so to speak, and then they kind of gain a little bit of speed and momentum, and they test their structures even more. Now in 5th grade, the students focus on changes in the ecosystem, and not just the changes in the ecosystem and what happens, but they learn to take it a step further and predict changes that could happen. So they're applying their knowledge with every part of the food chain, and they're going through how the predator and prey, the increase or decrease in predator and prey might affect the whole ecosystem, all the way through the entire food web. And then the other problem that they're designing and solving is providing fresh water to those in need. And they're solving the question of which stakeholders need the most water. So they are themselves positioning as stakeholders in companies, and they are analyzing, interpreting data, and they're carrying out a live system to test and analyze the findings of, did this corporation, did this system need fresh water more? What were the effects of these stakeholders not getting all that they needed? And these little guys are kind of my little, I guess, pet project, you would say. This is a little bit of STEM and coding in the classroom. These robots are coding robots in the sense that you give them small instructions on their backs. So I'll zoom in a little bit more so that makes sense. And the students code them to get to a final destination. So they are learning how to plan and use teamwork and code at the same time. And then the teacher, nature, and me can let this go, and I had to add some math and some sight words in there. And then this gives you a little bit of a snapshot. So the students are planning their routes. They would have to solve a math problem or give their friends and partners a sight word to look for, and then program their bots to find that one. But right now, looking forward to the different changes within the science department is we've all really had a lot of success, and the teachers have enjoyed carrying out these science kits in their classroom. And I know I see the change in the joy in the students' faces when they are interacting hands-on with the science kit materials. And anytime I step into the classroom and the kids are performing these tasks, they're always up, they're engaging in discussion, and they're solving problems. And they're doing it together. And it's extremely refreshing to see. And it brings a whole new level to the problem-solving process for them. It makes it very authentic. So that's been great for us this school year. And that is our main focus. We're continuing to, some of the teachers are adding some life science and some physical science or engineering kits to their classroom practice and their different science experience because they really see how successful the hands-on practice in the science study is. So,
Thank you very much. You can talk about something all day long, but when you get to touch it and feel it, be part of it, I think it makes impressions on the children. Thank you for all that you're doing.
I have a bunch of questions. So,
Okay.
first question, can you briefly summarize ABCs of STEM?
ABCs of STEM. That is another one. Yeah. So the ABCs of STEM is another kit that we are not so much piloting, but implementing this year in the primary classroom. I don't know, microphone? Okay. So the ABCs of STEM are each kindergarten student K through in 1st grade and 2nd grade gets to be the STEM student of the week. So you take ABCs, so the literacy component, and you combine it with different STEM activities. So the students are combining what they're learning in English language arts to the STEM. So STEM student of the week takes their kit home. They do almost a placemat full of activities, maybe 5 or so 10 minutes at night, every night. And they bring their findings and their work back to their classmates, and they share out what they discovered. And each student gets to have a turn to feel like a successful presenter, and they're really explaining their findings and their their work they're doing with their families. So it's a great way to include families in the classroom and vice versa.
And there was no cost to that one, right? There's no cost.
No, so thankfully, we had those at no cost, and National Grid is sponsoring our kits, and for our thanks to their generosity, the students are going to probably write what we'll find the most adorable thank you letters and cards, and those are going to get sent out at the end of the year, and the teachers are continually plugging along through the ABCs.
I think this question is more for maybe Andrea, but just in terms of percentage of time on science in elementary school classrooms this year compared to last year, what's the difference in time?
Vast increase in time of what they can do as opposed to looking at a book. Usually a split between social studies and science, but now they're finding they would do a unit in social studies and some reading in science. Now it's a unit in science and a unit in social studies. So you've seen an increase in engagement with the amount of time the teachers and students are spending in science.
So I was talking to the secondary science department today about how this is going to impact the fact that we're doing science labs starting in kindergarten all the way up through, and then in 6th grade for the first time this year also, we have a certified science teacher, not just an elementary teacher teaching science, doing lab science in 6th grade. And then what we hope to do next year is also to add separate labs in addition to science classes in 7th and 8th grade. So all students will have lab science, and then hopefully the end result of that is getting people more interested in science by the time they get to high school, so that more of our students continue to take science classes. But Melanie's been very, very helpful in this, and also, so she serves as the STEM coordinator in the elementary school, but she's also she's the teacher on special assignment, helping elementary teachers and secondary teachers use all the new instructional tech that we've been using too. So Melanie's been a really nice addition in this role this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
If any of those children are interested in coming to present this to us, I would love to see them.
That could be a great. I know, that's lip sync kindergarten.
We almost made that happen. So because I had said kits, and somebody heard kids. There was a bit of a discrepancy about like what we were bringing to kids. And I was like, whoa.
That works. So we're superintendent status report and update.
I just want to give you a brief update on a couple of different things. The first thing that I want to update you on is our number of positive cases. So today is the 22nd, so I'm missing last week. But I think last week we had 3, I think, positive cases district-wide. I took the quarantining off entirely because we're not doing any quarantining at this point. And so our cases remain low, even with masks off. So things seem to be going really well. So that's a really positive thing. I also wanted to give you an update on just our DEI policy. So we passed the DEI policy a couple of months ago, and I wanted to talk about, so we're talking right now, so the DEI policy itself is a pretty philosophical statement. So it deals with a lot of general terms. But what really matters is how it actually is put into action. So I wanted to talk about some things that we're looking at putting into action because of the policy. So the one thing that I've been talking about is the need for continued staff development. So this staff development can take a lot of different forms. Like today, for example, there were some teachers who were prototyping a co-teaching workshop. And so we had 2 pairs of general ed teachers and special ed teachers who work together normally. And they were working with the facilitator today to improve how they work together, how they plan together, how they plan for working with both general ed students and special ed students in the classroom. And so what we hope to do with that is to train these 2 pairs, and also Polly Benjamin, who's the assistant principal in the high school, is also sitting through that training. What we hope to do is eventually do that with every co-teaching pair that we have in the district, so that everybody has a better way of working together and for the benefit of all of our kids. The other thing that we're really looking at is disaggregated data analysis. So instead of bringing you just kind of top line data from survey results and things like that. I'll bring you some data from different subgroups so you can see what those different subgroups might have to say about certain issues, and we'll do the same thing with state assessments and other kinds of assessments when we present on those things. And also, more importantly, teachers will be looking at when they do planning during the summer for changes that they're going to make. The other thing that we've really started, and really Jeff has really taken to this as a parent in the district. It's nice to have a parent in the district so close by, because it's important that we put some scrutiny on the supplies and other items that we're asking families to pay for in the district. So there's a lot of things that you might not think of as being deterrents for taking certain courses, but they really could be. And I know that, you know, from having grown up in a household where we didn't have a lot of extra money, there's some things that happen in those situations. One is that the parents will just kind of go without other things in order to provide their students with the supplies that they need for school, but they shouldn't have to do that. And then the other thing that kids could do is actually self-select out of certain courses, certain programs, because they just don't have the money to pay for those things. For me, it was always basketball. My basketball teams, not that I was a good basketball player, so basketball teams always had the same shoes, the same sneakers. And I remember as a kid feeling that, well, this pair of sneakers cost $85. There's no way I was going to get those sneakers, so why bother even trying out for the team? I mean, not to mention that I probably wouldn't have made the team anyway, but it's good to know. So scrutiny on things like money for field trips, money for calculators, money for all these things that we take for granted as being part of school. A lot of these things are actually things that the district can provide. And sometimes it's just as simple as teachers not asking because things have been done in a certain way. So we had a situation where we had a field trip. The cost was $15. It's a field trip that people have gone on forever. And so we got the request, and Jeff noted, hey, this is something that we can probably pay for as a district. We don't need to charge parents $15 to go to it, because everybody should go to this field trip. It's an academic field trip. And so we were able to take care of that for them. So some extra scrutiny on those supplies and other family-funded items. Also, inclusion of some kind of DEI in the process for the texts that we're selecting and the curriculum that we're reviewing. So we already review textbooks and curriculum, but this becomes another item in that to look for as we're kind of trying to compare different materials to each other. Also, another thing that is really going away is the subjective gatekeeping that sometimes happens to courses. Sometimes, whether teachers mean to or not, they make recommendations to courses, and there might be some students that aren't encouraged to take advanced courses when they really should be encouraged to do that. And so taking away all of those things that prevent kids from taking courses that they want to take is something that we should be looking at whenever possible. And especially when those recommendations are based on like subjective means. Like I'm not here, but I had a teacher once upon a time who told me that he could tell who was ready to go into accelerated earth science because he could just see it in their eye. And that's never something that we should use to make recommendations. So if it's based on passing the course that came before, that makes sense. If it's based on a test that everybody has to take, that makes sense too. But limiting those subjective recommendations. We also think that it's a good practice to conduct regular walks to make sure that everybody's on track and that we're all implementing everything with fidelity. That's a really good process for DEI or for anything to make sure something's done with fidelity. Another thing that we're doing and that we did a couple of Fridays ago is department-wide goal setting. There were some really interesting goals that some departments are working on. So when those are finalized, we'll release them to the community. But a lot of things like, for instance, we talked about, music departments talking about band instruments and how does that deter, does rental fees, does that deter some people from participating in music? We also talked about, trying to think of some other examples. I don't know if it's coming to me right now, but there were a lot of examples of different things that departments noticed. One, I think social studies department was specifically concerned about how female students felt about their sense of belonging. That data point was something that they wanted to work on as a department, is trying to dig deeper into why do our female students say that they don't feel like they belong at a higher rate than our male students. And another one is regular reporting to you on our progress, and so I'll continue to do that. So just an example, I'm going to give you some data tonight on some post-secondary outcomes. So it's important to look at graduation rates, but sometimes kids can graduate and then even though they have a diploma in their hand, that next step isn't laid out, and that's a problem too. And so we need to continue looking at data and continue finding ways to get data on what happens to kids after they graduate. So from my perspective, these students belong to our school forever. And so it's important for us that they're prepared for their lives. And so we need to make sure that we're preparing them for what they want to do. And that doesn't always mean college. So it could mean lots of different things. College is not the best pathway for some kids. And it's not even the best pathway for, as many kids that are going to college now. So we see a lot of people going to college, not finishing degrees, or going to college and deciding that they want to enter a trade program before that. So we need to make sure that we have that in mind, that we're looking at not just college acceptance, college enrollment, but also people who are getting apprenticeships, if they're joining the workplace and careers that they want, whether they're obtaining certification in areas that help them get good paying jobs. So we do need some additional data. So we need some additional data.
During, but if you want to let us know when he's done, we can get it.
So we do need some additional data on our CTE students and what they're doing after they finish CTE programs, career technical education programs, after they graduate. So we'd like that. And we'd also need to take better data on what certifications kids are getting in high school too. And then also, it's important that we start doing some post-secondary surveying. So with this year's senior class, one of the things we're going to try to do is collect a non-Dwaynesburg email address so that we can ask them a year out, did you feel prepared when you went to college? Are you still on the same pathway that you were on when you left? So here are some post-secondary outcomes. We actually do get data from this organization called National Clearinghouse, and they give us data on what happens to our kids after they graduate. So a lot of the data is, actually all of the data is related to college. So even though all those other pathways are equally important, the only data that we have right now is college enrollment data. And some of it's projected. So the ones with asterisks are data because those students are still in progress. So it's just a projection of where we think college enrollment is. And sometimes when we're talking about post-secondary data, we talk about persistence. So persistence is students who not just enroll in college, which we have a pretty good idea of who's enrolling in college when they leave us. What we don't know is, do they stay in college for that second year and beyond? And so that yellow line shows the average persistence of a high school graduate. So the average persistence is 49%, which isn't terribly high nationwide. And the blue shows college enrollment here at Dwaynesburg. And so as you can see, like we're above average slightly in terms of enrollment. But the red line shows persistence. And so what that shows is there's a gap between our students staying in college for that second year and where the rest of the nation is. So that's something to take a look at. Sorry, I think I said the average was 49%. The average is actually like 60-something percent. That 49 is just kind of hanging out there as a label of where we are. So yeah, there's a gap there of why aren't our students staying in college at the same rate that their peers at other schools are staying. We can also look at college enrollment by gender. So the kind of maroonish line shows female college enrollment, and that's just here. And the green line shows male college enrollment. And you can see that there's not, the red line here shows the total number of females that we had in each graduating class. And the blue shows how many of those students enrolled. So not a big gap between number of female students that we had and the number that are actually enrolling in college. Actually, a very small number aren't enrolling in college and are doing something else after they graduate. When you look at male students, what we see, and I think what you see at other schools too, is a widening gap in male students not enrolling in college. And so that's something to keep our eyes on and to figure out why that might be. And if they're not enrolling in college, that's okay, as long as they have another post-secondary plan. So it's important to know what that plan might be. When you look at things like enrollment in college by economic status, you can see that, so that maroonish line here shows our economically disadvantaged students. And the green line shows the students that we have that are not economically disadvantaged. So now, even though there was at one time a really big gap between economically disadvantaged kids and non-economically disadvantaged kids going to college, that gap is not really there at this time. And that could be for a lot of reasons. The Excelsior Scholarship was a big reason, and there's lots of other reasons why kids who don't have financial means can go to college now, whereas they couldn't before. You can look at degree completion, and you can see how big that gap started, right? And how it really got very close right around the time that that Excelsior Scholarship started. And now it seems to be widening again. So making sure that those students have all they need, not just once they get into college, but after. So what are the things that they need to continue being successful all the way to degree completion? So this is, I think, the same thing, but it shows the numbers instead of percentages. Look at a small school. Percentages really skew how the data looks. So this shows our actual number of economically disadvantaged students versus the number of kids that actually enrolled in college. So you can see still a little bit of a gap that seems to be widening. And then we have this one, which shows our students with disabilities and their enrollment in college. So this is one where the data that we received from National Clearinghouse actually, we don't think is accurate. So it actually showed that none of our students with disabilities were enrolling in college. And we knew anecdotally that that wasn't true. So we were able to review and find out what's happening with our students with disabilities. So not as big a gap as we thought there was. And then also in terms of non-white students and our total non-white students, our total white students, not really a big gap between college enrollment with those two groups either. We also take a look at where our students are going to college, because that also tells us an awful lot. So not surprisingly, we do have our first two most popular colleges that students go to are still community colleges, HBCC and Schenectady County Community College. And so we did make that partnership with Schenectady earlier this year, knowing that lots of kids are going to college at a community college anyway, to make sure that they can either reduce the time or reduce the costs at that community college to be able to get their degree and either transfer or go on into the job that they want to have. But this also shows us the other schools that are popular, have been popular over time. You can see a lot of SUNYs in the mix and some private colleges around the area too.
How many years is that?
I think that's since, I'm pretty sure that's since 2013. Pretty sure, because all the other data was from around then. And that's it. So there's a lot of stuff to look at when you're looking at how our students are doing, not just, so you can't just stop at diploma. You have to go beyond to see if they're successful in whatever it is that they're trying to do.
Are there ways, Jim, that we know to get a hold of the data related to, or is that something we're just exploring related to kids who take different paths post-graduation?
We really have to ask them. We have to figure out a way to survey them. So there's no set way to get that unless they provide it to us. So I know that the special ed teachers and psychologists and counselors are working on a goal, and one of their goals is to figure out some kind of surveying mechanism to keep in touch with families of their students at least a year or two out, to make sure that those students are still okay and have access to everything they need to have access to. because those special ed students especially have access to all kinds of services through Access VR. We need to make sure that they know how to get those. So we do have a transition coordinator who's in our audience now and who knows all about that, who helps them. But then once they're out of high school and no longer have Shannon, I would bet you though that Shannon probably hears from some of her kids a couple of years out to find out how they're doing. But to kind of formalize that, just so that we know how everybody's doing, it's going to be tough to get that information. But I think it's worthwhile to pursue it to make sure that we're doing a good job to prepare them when they're in school.
Yeah, and getting indications on if they've made choices not to would be fascinating, is the wrong word, but it would be important to know, why. Is it financial reason for them to leave school after starting school? Is it, a different life choice, which is completely fine, but good to know, like, is there something that needs earlier intervention at the high school level that can be assist with?
Like, do we need to show those kids some of those pathways well before we're showing them those pathways now? Do we need to start building those ideas in even when they're in middle school? Because really, when they're seniors, it's already they sort of have an idea of where they're going to head.
I love the idea of surveying to see the kids that did go to college, how prepared they were.
Yep.
Tony, you did a great job. I gotta say, I was not prepared for RIT calculus. That was so hard. But that would be great to see moving forward of what can you help.
Just at the transition in coursework, right?
Yeah.
If you think about a coursework load and then you go into a college, and it depends on where you go and what classes, of course, but having heard from 2 of the 5 so far as they enter into the college space, like their initial reactions, holy cow.
Yeah.
Like, one more than another based on the preparation and the types of coursework that child was taking. So it would, I think, are there ways to take maybe a non-AP course and model it, right, in different ways? I know we're limited by the instruction content, but in such an intensity level, to some degree that you kind of feel like what a college course might be.
Yeah, we're doing some work now too that with that study that we're doing with the rural schools through Harvard, we're studying some things that might indicate early on that students might need some more support. And one of the biggest indicators is how students are doing in 9th grade in math. So if they're struggling in 9th grade in math, there's a better than average chance that they're going to struggle to get into college first and then to persist once they get into college. And so we're working on some strategies to try to assist with that. I think the other thing that you can pair along with surveying are some things that we can do as a smaller school district that really show that somebody back at school still cares about them and is there for supporting them. In addition to surveying, like sending them like little care packages or a note halfway through freshman year, I think could go a long way to letting them know that you're still in their corner. Because they have an awful lot of support on a very human level here. And sometimes when they go off to bigger institutions, it's harder to find that. So in addition to maintaining that connection, it's important to also maintain that, that relationship with them, not just for data purposes, but to help them.
Thank you. If you want to send it, email either Jim directly, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any questions you have about that. Okay, we're going to move on to budget workshop.
Drive through.
All right, so tonight we'll have our 4th and final budget work session. So even since the last session, we've actually changed the budget amounts slightly to actually address some economic concerns. So tonight we'll talk about the condition of where the budget is right now, and some budget sections, the benefits section, and OCs, and then debt services. So just keep this in mind, the goals of the budget were to keep all current academic programs, so no cuts to the academics, no teacher cuts, no programming cuts. So we've kept that all in place. We're going to continue to focus on our district priorities, and to keep a responsible tax levy. So what we had decided to do was propose only a 1.8% tax levy increase, even though the tax cap was over 2%, and then to also prepare for the financial future. So there still is that possibility for fiscal cliff in years to come, because of the fact that we have federal funding that has been also funding the state. So our state aid, we did end up with 3% foundation aid this year. However, once that federal aid runs out, we don't know what that will actually bring to us. So that could mean that the state's funding formulas will also change. So some of the factors that we had to think about during the budget development, I grabbed the numbers of inflation because they just like last week, the numbers came out like well over 7%, so it was 8% inflation. So you can see this chart. I'm not sure you can see the dates here on the bottom, but just to kind of show in 17, 18, and 19, up until the pandemic, we had this up and down between like 1.5% to 3% inflation rates. All of a sudden, the pandemic hits, drops down to the bottom, and then it just climbs right in there. So this is where we are at the end of the chart here. It's like 7.95%. So this budget has to address that moving forward, because it could go up, it might level out, but I think if history repeats itself, it probably won't just drop right off the top. So some of the challenges also are that insurance rates are extremely high compared to years past. They are also higher than our original assumptions. So in the original draft budget, when we rolled over, I had a number that was actually sent to us by our administrator and by our insurance administrator. It looked like that was kind of going to be around the number that we needed to be, which was around 12%. We're looking at like a 15% increase on our insurance rates this year. So in all the years that I can remember, we've looked at insurance rates that go anywhere from like 5 or 6%. But then we've had this huge jump, and a lot of these insurance rates are adjusting because of the fact that there were things that were related to the pandemic. Also, to address class size, so we are actually adding a K through 6 teacher to address some class size concerns. The rising fuel prices. So not only insurance rates climbing, but rising fuel prices through the roof. And then inflation costs for any other supply and contractual things. So anytime we try and contract with any organization for any educational services, those prices are also increasing very rapidly. And this is just so this is a run of just all of the fuel costs that the district has to deal with. So to look at any of our heating fuel, propane for the buses, gasoline for the buses. Fortunately, we don't have any diesel buses anymore, so that line that's at a zero. The only diesel that we have is basically just for the operations equipment for some of the tractors. So it looked like when we started this out that the propane prices could actually we could start to level that out and start to drop it, because our fleet of propane buses is being replaced with the gasoline, the really efficient gasoline motors. However, with the expectation that propane will also increase with heating fuel, with gasoline, we have to take that into consideration as well. So at the last presentation, I had presented an overall, just a draft number that represented only a 10% increase in fuel. But since then, things have looked even worse. And so now we're looking at over a 20% increase, just to kind of take into consideration that it's not going to go away overnight. So at draft right now, we're looking at $18,672,000. It's a $787,000 increase, which is a 4.4% increase from budget to budget. Keep in mind that our tax levy increase has not changed throughout that whole discussion. So we've kept it at 1.8% with a $150,000 945. What we're going to do, we're going to dig into the savings a little bit more to fund that gap.
Jeff, what's the dollar amount gap from the original reading in the budget? Somehow, do you know?
At the last time it was 18,642, I think it was.
That all fuel costs and insurance, pretty much. The majority of that increase. The majority of that increase is all fuel costs and insurance.
Yeah, really, yes. A lot of it comes from the fuel cost increases since the last time. So on the revenue side of the budget, state aid numbers haven't changed. We haven't heard anything solid yet. However, things are looking positive, at least with the state. It looks like both houses pretty much in agreement to a lot of the things that are important to us.
Yeah, I think what we saw in both of the one house budgets that are out right now are pretty generous to public schools, and so there's a lot of things in there that we weren't expecting. So we'll see how that washes out. But one of the things that I wanted to point out too, Jeff talked about foundation aid formula. One of the things that both of the houses have is a money that goes toward a foundation aid study. So that's very interesting, and especially for schools like ours that are already fully funded with foundation aid. We were really hoping that they wouldn't just say, okay, foundation's fully funded, you're going to be flat forever now. We were hoping that there was going to be something to possibly replace foundation aid. And so we'll see how that study goes. But it looks like both houses want that.
So these state aid numbers are the same. So by the next time, we should be able to give you the update on what the final state's budget gives us in state aid. Again, these numbers will probably change and fluctuate a little bit by the next time. If both houses agree, typically that's a good thing, and sometimes these numbers will actually increase. So fingers crossed on that. So an overall look at the revenue. So right now, property taxes is $8,536,811. Where state aid is $8,818,234. So both of those two revenues are the biggest sources of our revenue for the district. They have been kind of neck and neck pretty much all along. So they generally range anywhere from like 45 to 47%. So just the fact that the state aid did increase this year looks pretty good. So that one kind of jumped ahead a little bit. Then on the towards the bottom there, you'll see that the fund, there's a representation of fund balance. So that's the part that I was saying we're digging into the savings. So we'll be digging into the savings to balance the budget, that gap that would be created by the increases that we have in the budget. We'll talk about the expenditures. So this is an overall summary of what our overall increases look like right now. So just to give you a visual of what it looks like with the medical and benefits portion. So if you take the medical and you take a portion of the operations and maintenance budget, which is in there too, just those alone represent 50% of our increase. And that primarily is due to fuel costs. And then the green section there, the total medical and benefits, that's entirely our health insurance a huge portion of our budget.
Yeah, I like this graphic too, because it really shows how much of our increases are baked in already based on contracts. So the gold portion is instructional salaries, and the green portion is medical and benefits. And so that those little slivers that are left over are the increases for other things. So a lot of stuff is really determined by contract.
So I'd also like to add that this budget, the kind of the right side of this the pie here, represents basically a budget increase that is pretty much normal for any of our staffing costs and contractual costs that would be increased. Whereas the left side is really just that economic impact that we're going to take on. So if we were to take that out, this budget would be a very small step compared to where we're at right now. So next we'll talk about BOCES. So BOCES was established for the purpose of sharing resources and pooling resources. It was to create component school districts to receive the BOCES aid from the state, and that encourages all the school districts to share resources. So we get back BOCES aid by sharing resources with other districts in the region or across the state. So right now, our current BOCES aid ratio is 69.9%. Not all BOCES services are aided at that amount. So our actual range for like what we get in a COSER generally ranges anywhere from 30 to 67%. Our district's overall BOCES aid percentage on the average, we're averaging around 52 to 56%. So for every dollar, you're getting about 52 cents or anywhere from 52 cents to 56 cents a dollar. So we are getting quite a good kickback on the BOCES revenue side. And you can see like part of our revenues that I created or that I showed you earlier, our BOCES aid has gone up for this year significantly, and we'll continue to try and use BOCES for as many things as we can because it definitely saves us the year following. I also threw in some snapshots here of some of the other BOCES here that we actually work with across the state. So we work primarily with Capital Region BOCES. And then when our Capital Region BOCES doesn't have a specific service, sometimes another BOCES across the state will have that service that we're looking for. So we can actually subscribe to that BOCES service through Capital Region BOCES, and they'll do a shared agreement, and then we still get the BOCES aid. So even if there's not something locally that's available to us, we can still get it from other BOCES. So our BOCES budget is quite a large portion of our overall budget. It's a little more than $2 million. Some of the BOCES budget though is special education. So because of the fact that BOCES has aid on special education services, it makes a lot of sense to subscribe to their services through and use all those special education. Also, the line that slowly keeps creeping up is computer-aided instruction. As we move forward more and more, technology is really a part of what we do in education. So that line really starts to increase. It's starting to become a large portion of the budget. Also, occupational ed in BOCES is like the CTE classes or the CTE courses and all that for the kids to go out to either Schoharie CTE, Albany CTE. I think we also maybe have somebody going to Honason. So all of those other outplaced locations, this is how we pay for those kids to have those opportunities. Then also you can see the administrative portion there. That's the part that you're actually voting on. It's the administrative and the capital portion that the board actually votes on when we do the vote for the BOCES thing.
One of the nice things about belonging to Cap Region BOCES is Cap Region BOCES really is selling services now to just about every other district in the state. They have a very strong like communications service that just about everybody subscribes to. Their technology is more than half of the state. And so when people do those cross contracts from other BOCES, that's advantageous to the people who are in that local BOCES because we take advantage of the extra service cost for that cross contract. So they're making a lot of smart business moves that benefit us too.
So here's an overall look from budget to budget of our BOCES budget items, data processing, general instructional, occupational ed, and creative instruction are those things that we're seeing an increase. I'd like to remind you that when we talked about some of the other sections of the budget, I did not exclude them from those sections. So this is just a look overall summary of our BOCES lines as well. So this doesn't exactly represent the other sections.
It's a double click on both.
We got you.
Exactly. There you go. So next, let's look at the debt. So the debt is pretty much decided when we do a capital project and when we determine our bus purchase. So on the left there, you'll see the representation of where we are with our debt for our building. So the drops, the sudden drops in building debt are those years that we're looking to take on additional debt or take on or level out debt to do capital projects to maintain our buildings. Those are those years that we have to do our capital projects. So if we were to take on another capital project right now, it would change our building debt and it would impact the taxpayers more. So what we want to do is lesser impact would be those years that it's dropping. So that's why we are starting to talk about the capital project on the 29th. So because we're going to start planning for that drop in our building debt. And then the thing that changes a lot is the bus debt. So last year we purchased 2 small buses and 1 large bus. So that changed the bus debt slightly. It's not really going to impact us that badly. It's not going to change too much for us, but you can see that there was a slight drop just in our repayments. But overall, from budget to budget, for next year for 22-23, those the total debt budget stays pretty level. In fact, it's dropping about $5,000. So it's pretty well. That's not one of the areas we're going to see any increases. So this is the good news. Is kind of the saving grace for some of the other things. This is an overall look at where we've got with our debt budget. So when you plan for debt, you try to level it out. This is an ideal situation with debt. So you can see the year from 2017 to 2018. That was the year right before we started to take on the debt for this project. So the debt that paid for this auditorium, the gymnasium over the elementary school, the renovations that we did in 17-18, or in 16-17 to 17-18. That's where you see that increase right there. Overall, so this is the benefits budget. So originally it looked like our employment, our retirement was going to increase. We did calculation. I'm comfortable with saying we don't need to increase that from budget to budget. We can survive another year with a 0% increase for those lines. Especially the fact that we have our health insurance is going to be increasing at a very large rate. I was able to, when I calculated it, just doesn't make sense to increase any of the other budget lines in the benefits. So we're going to leave those at 0. So the benefits, the benefits lines consist of the employee retirement systems, both for employee and for teacher. So security expenses, flexible benefit plans, and health insurance buyback. So there's some savings there too with the health insurance buyback. So anybody that chooses not to take on our health insurance, they get a health insurance buyback. It's not a lot because it's a big save, but it's a big savings to the district. And so this is an overall look at our benefits budget. And again, this is the jump you're seeing is basically for the health insurance, entirely for that health insurance rate. And then the proposition 2 on the balance this year will be to purchase 2 65-passenger buses and 1 30-passenger bus. It is necessary to keep cycling out our buses because they are on a 10-year replacement plan. So when we get to that 10-year mark, we decide which bus needs to depart. And it's based on DOT inspections and all that, which ones will pass, which ones will not. There have been times when we'll take a bus that's been with us for 10 years and we'll say, you know what, we can keep it for another year because it's still in good shape, still passing a DOT inspection. And there have been times when we've taken a bus out of the fleet that's only maybe 9 years. It all depends when they get to that closer to that expectancy of about 10 years. That's when we have to balance out and decide which ones have to go and which ones have to be replaced. We have to stay on a steady plan, or else we could see a huge impact later on if we have to buy 5 or 6 buses later on, because all of a sudden we have a couple buses that aren't passing inspections. Currently, right now, we have one that's sitting in the yard that can't pass the inspection. So that's going to be the one that's going to go. Plus we have, so now we've got and of course we've got the other bus that was ordered because of the bus accident. A little Q&A. So just if you think back for one of the earlier slides, if we were to do a budget increase without the health insurance thing and all those extra fuel costs, we'd only be looking at a 2.31% increase in budget. So overall, that's it's less than an actual 3% increase that you would expect to see from year to year. So besides all that, that's why you're seeing that increase with the health insurance and fuel prices. Is this the only year we're going to see health insurance rates increase like this? Well, probably not.
Experience tells me no.
Probably not. Yeah, no, magic people, right? So, and in talking to our third-party administrator, we're very hopeful that it won't go that high, but nothing's promised. So, also this budget, we need to keep in mind that it could happen again, and we need to be prepared for that. Hopefully it won't happen. Hopefully we can level that out a little bit next year. But we are going to keep that in the back of our heads. We could sit here again next year talking about another double-digit increase.
How large is our enrollment pool? Like you said before, we're in like a collaborative with other districts.
So we are in a group with Sharon Springs and with Vernox Westfield and ourselves. Originally, our health insurance consortium consisted. We also included Voorheesville at one point. They did leave for another group. So it's around 500.
And Jeff, do you know, or can you find out, are the rates within this particular consortium consistent? Everybody's talking. Are they consistent with the rate increases that other districts that are perhaps in other consortiums are seeing? I don't know, what's the trigger point for us to say, do we belong in another consortium?
Yes and no, but yes and no. However, there are consortiums that are seeing lower rates go, in their increases. Is this the year to jump ship? No, it's not. And the reason why is because when you're at a high exposure rate, when you're seeing a high rate, they're going to still rate us high when we go to join another. So our exposure rate because of claims is high, and that's how we were. There's no way to really back out of it at this point. You just gotta, if you were gonna leave, you would actually have to be when it's low. But we've had such a great trend of being low for years. It definitely doesn't just make sense to try and
When the usage is low or when the premiums are low?
when
Like the claims data?
the claims
The
is
spend,
based on.
because that's
So-
when you want to go, when your spend is low.
Right.
You have more negotiation power.
So there's a lot too that we benefit from belonging to such a small consortium. We have a seat at the table. Is it me now? No. So belonging to a small consortium means that we have a seat at the table and a pretty powerful voice. Are you still the president of that?
Yes.
Group? So we definitely have a voice there, whereas in a bigger consortium, our concerns wouldn't necessarily be heard in quite the same way. And it's also true, Jeff, is this the last year of remedying the fact that Burn was picking up more than their fair share of that consortium? And now we have reached the end of that kind of leveling off, and we won't have to deal with that again next year. But they were really, their pay was really outsized.
It was mismatched and unfair. So,
Just something to keep an eye on and to watch the trends with that.
so
In a company of 11,000 people, my premium doubled this year, so I don't know how much having more people
Right.
helps.
in fact, when we were first proposed the numbers for health insurance, it was actually higher. And then I said, I don't like that number. Go back. So we ended up with the 15% instead of the even higher number. So I tried to fight it a little bit. Got a little somewhere, but not as far as I wanted to. But it was based on the data, and when I saw the data, it made sense why we were seeing that increase. So, and lastly, again, as I mentioned earlier on, we're not cutting any programs in this budget, so keeping the same opportunities for kids. So this is the final work session. The next time that we speak, I'll be presenting the board with a budget to accept and to propose to the public.
So that being said, are there any questions about this section of the budget or any of the sections that we've reviewed so far?
I appreciate your level of detail, Jeff, and it all makes sense and it's easy to follow and for, as a person who isn't a budget person, really helpful. Thank you.
Agreed. It seems like you've got that right balance of detail and understandability.
And I like that you're reacting to the world. The world changed, things changed, and then you were,
Yep.
awesome.
Right.
It's great.
It's clear.
Clear, Bill.
The reaction also is probably more conservative than we need to be, but it's better than alternative.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to say was that in addition to the other things in both one house budgets, that study of the foundation need, another thing that's in both is increasing the amount of a BOCES employee that's aidable to the district. So we have a couple of part-time coaches that do work here, and then also our kids go to BOCES programs. And so right up until this point, BOCES employee salaries have only been aidable up to $30,000. So that exists from a time when teachers made $30,000, and now both houses, I think, are at 60 for the budget. So it's likely that we'll be able, more of that will be aidable. So that's a really positive thing. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, because I haven't brought it up in 2 meetings, is that you will see some nearby districts go out at a 0% tax levy increase. And Jeff, can you explain to us again why going out at a 0% tax levy increase is not a great idea?
Kicking the can down the road, really.
That's right.
So when you don't increase your taxes with, especially now with the if you stay at 0, you can't increase the taxes at you lost that dollar amount. So if you lose $100,000 because you stayed straight, you lose that $100,000 no matter what. Because your tax cap is what your tax cap is. So it makes better sense to plan. And instead of asking the community to go out and approve a 5 or a 6% increase on your taxes and make that huge impact the following year, instead of gently increasing things as the economy changes. So it doesn't make sense to just go out with zero, because you're going to end up with a huge increase. And there's been districts in the area that they'll end up seeing these humongous increases because it stayed for zero for so long. And it looks good and you pass the budget because it's zero, but then you don't pass the budget when you really need that money, like really
Or
desperately.
you have to override the cap or
And you
something
have
like
to
that,
override the cap.
which is very unlikely. So, I mean, if you see a district that is suggesting that they want to override the cap, look at their history of budgets, and I bet you'll be able to see some zeros in there. So, like a slow, steady, incremental increase is definitely a much better way to go than ups and downs, despite the short-term attractiveness of doing like a 0% levy increase. So you'll see it. So don't be mad. There's a strategy behind that, even though they'll have a short-term reward. Okay. And then also remember that some districts are in vastly different situations financially than our district. So there might be districts like city school districts that most of their money, it's not a 50-50 split between property taxes and state aid. It's almost all from the state. And so it does make sense. And they got very, very large increases in foundation aid because they were shorted for so long. A lot of the suburban schools, same situation, where they were shorted in foundation aid for so long. This year they're seeing big increases in foundation aid. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing 3% increase in foundation aid, and so everybody's situation is slightly different.
Not only the foundation aid, but some of the city schools, they're seeing huge increases in their federal funds.
And the stimulus dollars in some of those districts were very, very high.
Well, I think if we think about the three numbers, 4.4% is our budget over budget, right? And our levy is at 1.8. And then you were just saying, funding was 3%. So we're getting more from the state and being reasonable. And I think that that's the method that we've done. And I do think there's something to be said for being able to plan and expect versus, I know, being thrown a curveball year to year. 0% is great. I wish I could have 0% all of the time, but that's not reality. It's not how, right, exactly. But so I think it's a compromise given the cost increases that we're seeing across the board, unfortunately. Any other questions for Jeff and board members? Thank you, Jeff. Okay, presentation and approval of prior Board of Education meeting minutes. Approved minutes of March 8th, 2022 board meeting. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the meeting minutes from the March 8th, 2022 meeting as submitted. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Melissa. Second? Thank you, Shane. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, were there any, I don't believe there were any committee meetings, is that correct? Okay, thank you. First item, board item, correction of reorganizational meeting resolution. Resolved that the resolution passed by the Board of Education on July 6, 2021 regarding the bonding of district employees is hereby rescinded. And be it further resolved that the Board of Education clarifies that the necessary coverage for district employees, and more specifically the district treasurer and tax collector, is within the district's insurance coverage and general liability policy as set forth by its insurance carrier. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Teresa. Second. Tony, Diane. We'll give that one to you. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving on to financial, accept claims auditor's report. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the claims auditor's comments on general warrant A32 dated March 8th, 2022 in the amount of $260,190.01. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Francis. Second. Thank you, Melissa. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Accept financial reports. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the appropriation status budget transfer ECA ending 2/28/22 revenue status, and treasurer's reports ending February 28, 22, as provided by the treasurer and recommended by the Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Diane. A second? Thank you, Shane. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Approved contract for health and welfare services with Scotia Glenville CSD. Recommendation that the Board of Education approve the health and welfare services contract between Scotia Glenville Central School District and Waynesburg Central School District for 2021-2022 school year, as recommended by the Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Teresa. Second? Thank you, Melissa. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Approved transfer of funds for heating fuel. Recommendation that the Duanesburg Board of Education approve the following budget amendment. Transfer a total of $64,000 reflected below in your agenda for the purpose of paying for increased heating fuel expenses as recommended by the Superintendent and Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Shane. A second? Thank you, Tony. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Approve ECA Club Advisor and stipend. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves the addition of a running club advisor as an extracurricular activities position to the DTA contract effective with the start of 2022-2023 school year. The stipend for this ECA shall be $1,288 per year. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Diane. A second? Thank you, Melissa. Any comments or questions?
My son is thoroughly enjoying this. I just need to drive faster to get
I will say,
here. Not having to be.
so another one of the goals that we're working on is trying to make sure that we can get kids to be able to participate in clubs that happen before school. This one happens before school, or clubs that happen after the late bus. So that's a goal for us too. The other thing that I wanted to point out, just for new board members, is that when somebody wants to do a new club, it first runs as like a pilot for a whole year before we attach a stipend, unless we decide that we want to give a stipend. Otherwise, there were tons of kids that were involved in this club, and it was definitely successful.
Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Other. Accept CSE, CPSE minutes. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the recommendation of the CSE and CPSE meetings in their minutes from the February 17th, March 2nd, 14th, and 15th, 2022 meetings. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Francis. Second, Diane. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Celeste, I abstain. Appointments, accept coach resignation, R. Patry. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the resignation of Ryan Patry, JV volleyball coach, effective March 2nd, 2022. Do I have a motion? Thank you, I will say Diane.
You go.
And Teresa, will you second? Thank you. Any comments or questions?
This is only the club.
This is only volleyball. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Accept resignation, K. Yuri. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the resignation of Kristen Yuri, high school special ed aide, retroactive to March 11th, 2022. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Shane. A second? Thank you, Melissa. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Accept the resignation of Jay Jenke. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the resignation of John Jenke, evening cleaner, effective 4/1/2022. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Diane. A second? Thank you, Tony. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Accept resignation, S. Rondu. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the resignation of Sandra Rondu, health teacher and junior senior building mentor coordinator, effective April 24th, 2022. Do I have a motion? Teresa, do you have a second? Diane? Any comments or questions? I was told by my daughter I can't vote on this. I'm to vote against her resignation.
With regret.
Yeah.
So, Sandra is accepted a job, we'll search for a house in 45 seconds away.
Kids are really gonna miss her.
Yeah, they are.
I mean,
I hear there were tears today.
Oh, I'm sure.
I assume there are classes in progress.
Yes, sir. So we are looking for a substitute to do the short term and then also we posted to hire a new health/PD teacher. So she also did PE/health and PE certified. A very special uniform.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, approve appointments. Recommendation that the Board of Education approve the following appointments as recommended by the Superintendent, Assistant Superintendent of Management Services, and Athletic Director. ECA appointments are for the applicable 2021-2022 school year and sports season, beginning with preseason practice and ending with the conclusion of the season, including sectional play. All appointments are employees at will. An appointment at this time does not guarantee employment for the entire school term or year. And the names are as listed in the agenda. I stepped backwards here. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Diana. Second? Thank you, Francis. Any comments or questions?
Just have a question. So the person, John, that we just approved the resignation, he's becoming a substitute. Is that what happened? Got it.
Good catch. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the last item on our agenda is information, and I think this is just about some dates that are upcoming. Reservations for the BOCES annual meeting, RSVP that's due, annual BOCES meeting. Are we, Celeste, planning a short meeting for the BOCES vote while we're talking about that? I think it's April 28th. 27th, okay. Oh, we haven't, so we'll just do it at that, add it to the agenda, okay. No drive-by. Okay.
That's important. So that's a different night of the week.
Yes.
Okay.
Short, but I don't go back to vacation until Tuesday night. Oh, right, it's all about me.
Is anyone going to the BOCES annual meeting?
Want to go?
I will say, I think that they're showing off the Special Ed Academy at Airline Drive, that tour that's
Yeah,
listed under
that's true.
information. Those buildings are pretty impressive. So there's a brand new CTE building, so they're not gonna have a program in Mohammed next year. BOCES is shifting those programs over to the same campus that all their other buildings are on. And there's a new CTE facility, and then there's a Special Ed Academy that opened this year, but nobody really got to see it because of COVID and everything, so it's probably worth checking out.
Okay, well, we can coordinate, and if anyone feels up to carpooling and going. Okay, at this time, the board will be moving into executive session. No additional intent to return to regular meeting to conduct any further business. Going to motion to move into executive session at 8:01 p.m. to discuss personnel issues. So I have a motion. Thank you, Melissa. Second. Thank you, Shane. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Good. Thank you. Yeah, go, sure.